What's up, nerds? My name is Steve from Flipping the Nerd, and this is my top 10 favorite Halloween Horror Nights 29 houses, Universal Studios Orlando edition. Because there is a difference between the Hollywood and the Orlando houses. So I just came back from Halloween Horror Nights. It was an incredible trip. I also went to Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party at Disney World, and there's a lot that I loved about that event. Check out for all the videos about those two events on my channel. I just released the two haul videos, like the merchandise hauls. I did both Halloween Horror Nights and Mickey's Not So Scary. Now I'm doing the top 10 houses for Halloween Horror Nights. And coming up this week, you will see recaps of the events. I filmed the whole experience, and I hope you can check out those videos as well. But for this video, so there are 10 houses, so all houses are represented in my top 10. And because there are only 10 houses, my 5 honorable mentions, I'm going to rank the scare zones, of which there are 5, so it works out perfectly. And I'm also going to talk about the 2 shows. So this is kind of a recap of the event at the same time. Might as well while I'm at it. So just a huge shout out first to Katie from Ruby Songbird 13 Art, or Pumpkins and Boobs, which is this great blog that she does. She actually ran Horror Nights with me and my wife for parts of it, including the 2 shows, and it was really cool to see her. So huge shout out to her. Go check her out on Instagram and stuff like that. And yeah, so before I get into the honorable mentions, I just want to talk about the 2 shows they had this year. The first one was called Marathon of Mayhem. It's a water show, so they use kind of these jets that they shoot up, and they project images on the water and also on the buildings in the background. You'll see it in all these things, you'll see kind of parts of it in my recap video. But it was a very, very cool show. It's the first year that they've done it. It replaces what used to be like a stage show that they used to have on the side. It was very cool to see. You saw a lot of clips from the movies that were represented in the houses this year. Saw a lot of Ghostbusters, Stranger Things, Killer Klowns from Outer Space, Us, that kind of stuff. And I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was an interesting experience. It was something new. And I do hope that they do it again next year. I think it was something that I really enjoyed. The other one was Academy of Villains, which they called Altered State this year. This is the 4th year that Academy of Villains does the show, which replaced the Bill and Ted show, which they used to have. I really loved it the first year. I liked it a lot the second year, but that was the year that they had Hurricane Irma. So they actually, it actually blew off the stage. So they had to do kind of a quick show instead of their real show because they didn't have their stage anymore, which sucked. But they did a great job considering. Last year, not as much of a fan, but this year with Altered States, they were fantastic. It had humor. It did all sorts of crazy stuff. They're a dance troupe, but there was so much more than just dancing. There was a guy who juggled a soccer ball really well, and there's a guy who did contortions, me, my wife, Katie, and her wife were pretty much right in front of this guy, and it was disgusting. The way this guy moved. You'll see in my recap video, it's just oh God. And there's just so much other stuff. So very, very cool show. And both shows this year knocked it out of the park, so that was an awesome part of Halloween Horror Nights. So if I go into my top 5 for the scare zones are places kind of inside the park. So when you're walking either to attractions, to food, or shopping, or the houses themselves, they just kind of put these 5 zones where they have a theme to them. At number 5, it was Zombieland Double Tap. So this is based on the upcoming movie, which no one has seen yet. So that was weird because it's based on a movie I haven't seen, and it was terrible. I mean, I loved the first Zombieland. I do think the second Zombieland doesn't look as great as far as trailers go, and I think it's a little too late, if you ask me. And the scare zone did not help with my excitement for that movie at all. It's basically just a couple of little things. There's cars in the middle of the street. There are zombies, but they blend in with the crowd so much that you could barely notice that they're there unless they come after you. So it was So that didn't really do it for me. They had this whole setup that was really cool with a ride and one of those things that you hit to try to get the ball to the bell. And I finally caught that show, which you'll see in the recap, and it was just nothing. Nothing happens. A girl comes up and hits 2-3 zombies with a bat, then a clown comes in, and she beats that guy with the bat, and then boof, it's over. Back to their thing. It wasn't nothing like it was last year when they did the house with all the 80s like kind of superstars there. So kind of a bummer. At number 4, you have Anarcade. Anarcade is the first house that you see when you go into the park. It's lined with these neon arcade machines, and it has these neon characters, birds, and people with like hockey equipment that come after you. Wasn't a big fan of it. Nothing much to see. It is cool to see the neon, but it's not scary in the slightest, and definitely not something that I think you should put at the front of the park. Like at the front of the park, you should be putting your best stuff. This is what's supposed to get you into the mood to get into Halloween Horror Nights, and this one just didn't do the job, and that's why I rated it so low. And we have the Vanity Ball. The Vanity Ball was pretty cool. Not great, but because there's a lot of empty space, like there's not a lot going on, but it was a cool theme in the sense that it was basically people who did body modifications to try to look more beautiful, but it failed. And they're the kind of scare actors walking the street. There's a catwalk in the middle, and then there's 2 competing doctors that are doing plastic surgery on each side of the strip. Nothing special. Some of the scare actors had good makeup and stuff. The 2 doctors doing their thing was a little interesting, but overall pretty lame scare zone if you ask me. Then we had Vikings Undead. Viking Undead had the benefit of being in the coolest spot of all the scare zones. It's this bridge that bridges from where they do the monster show to where like E.T. and Simpsons are. And there's all these trees and stuff. So there's been Trick or Treat, which was awesome. They had something else last year. So because it's so atmospheric on its own without being Halloween Horror Nights, it helps a lot. Had you not told me it was Vikings themed, I really wouldn't have gotten that. Other than there's like a half kind of ship thing at the front, but nothing more than that. The scare actors were cool. What puts it higher on the list, I guess, is because there are a couple scenes which are pretty cool. You have like someone being roasted alive, and you have like stuff like that. But overall, still a disappointing scare zone, and that's kind of a theme this year for the scare zones, unfortunately. And finally, at number 1, Rob Zombie Hellbilly Deluxe. Not a great scare zone. It just was a disappointing year in scare zones, but in my opinion, the coolest one of them all. It was kind of like walking into a Rob Zombie music video. You have some of his kind of famous props from his music videos, including the car from Dracula. It was a cool zone. The scare actors were pretty good. You had kind of girls dancing on these like buildings, which was a little awkward to film, to be honest, because I try to be really thorough when I do my recap, but it's like filming the girls dancing is kind of like a little, but I still did it for you guys, right? Just for you guys. All right, I got interrupted by copyrighted music that plays on the clock I have in this room, which is why I should never record here, and I hopefully won't anymore. So let's just get into the top 10. Number 10. Nightingales Blood Pit. So this is one of the original houses that they had this year. This theme was kind of a Roman gladiator theme with these like bird-looking nurses that would attack them. It was super weird. I mean, it was pretty cool themed. The gore was on the high side, which I really liked. One of the, I guess, scarier houses that they had this year. But the bird creatures really didn't do it for me. A lot of people really liked this this house this year, and I just didn't. I don't know. It came down to a feeling. As cool as the gore was, because of those creatures, I just didn't love this house. But it was still a pretty good house. Like I said, all the houses this year were fantastic. So even though it's the lowest on my list, I thought it was still a pretty decent house. Just compared to the other 9 on this list, didn't quite cut the mustard. Is that an expression? Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, so that's it. That's all I have to say. Nightingales Blood Pit, not that great, but still pretty good. Makes no sense. Let's just get to the other one. Number 9. Yeti Terror of the Yukon. So shout out to my Canadian brethren there, Yukon being a territory in Canada. Yeti Terror Yukon was basically a cold house, it's like a cold village with these kind of hunter people. attacking these giant Yetis. What I appreciate about the house is it was cool in there because it's hot as hell in Florida. And as a Canadian, it was like unbearably hot at certain points. And this was a nice break from that. So that was cool. I did like I did really feel like I was in a winter town, which was really cool. The Yetis weren't too bad, but nothing great. Very obviously a costume. I mean, they did a good job of it, but still, I was very cognizant that it was a costume, and that kind of takes me away from it a little bit, just because they weren't that great of costumes. But they did sell the winter aspect. They did sell the Yeti and the Yukon and all that stuff, and that's why I put it higher than Nightingales. Did have some cool gore scenes as well, and that's why I put it at number 9. Number 8. House of a Thousand Corpses. The first IP house on my list, and a movie I deeply respect, and of course I have to say this, huge shout out and rest in peace to Sid Haig. He's the first horror celebrity I ever met. Super nice guy, and I was really sad to hear he passed. He passed the night, like the morning after I went to my last day at Halloween Horror Nights, and I had gone to the House of a Thousand Corpses before, and there is a Captain Spaulding in that house. And that was the highlight of the house because Captain Spaulding, the character, is amazing. Sid Haig was a great man as well. And the house was actually pretty cool. What puts it low on my list is that once you get into the store and you see Captain Spaulding, which is so cool, you go a little bit into the murder ride, and then the rest of the house takes place inside the house that's in the House of a Thousand Corpses. And unfortunately, there was a lot of the same going on over and over. The scenes were okay, the actors were pretty good recreating the movie, but because it all takes place in one house, it kind of felt like I was a little boring at times. You know, it's like the same thing over and over and over. One of my gripes with it, though, is that Rainn Wilson is in this movie, who played Dwight on The Office, and he becomes a mermaid at one point. And that scene should have been, I think, a focal scene because it's such a memorable thing to see. But they stuck it in a dark corner and you could barely see it. And because the security guards are rushing you so much, you might even miss it because you're constantly having to move. So a few gripes with this, but I love the movie. I love Sid Haig. I love Captain Spaulding. So House of a Thousand Corpses was still awesome, but not more than 8 on the list. Number 7. Depth of Fear. So this one takes place underwater, and they did a really good job of capturing the underwater feel. It had these ridiculous looking characters though, but I did like the characters a little bit better than the Yetis, as they did feel like they were unique. There's a really cool scene when you first enter where one of the aliens is hanging, and his his bottom has been ripped out, and you see the guts hanging out. It's just really, really cool. There's some real water in the ride, which was a nice touch, which really gave the feel that you're underwater even more than just the blue lights. They're kind of mimicking it. Surprisingly, some good scares in it as well, as the humans are fighting these creatures that are in this thing. I think they're original creatures. I don't think I've ever seen them in a horror movie or anything. So good job on the design. Not the greatest, but still enough to put it here at number 7. Number 6, Graveyard Games. This is the last of the the non-IP houses, so the original houses at Halloween Horror Night. And this one was a really claustrophobic look inside a crypt. So you're going kind of through a crypt and cemetery, and it's really, really tight. There's not a lot of open spaces, which really gives it kind of a spooker feel than some of the other one. You're being attacked by ghosts and banshees and stuff like that. And it was a really cool house. For those who did the Poltergeist house last year, which was my favorite house last year, the first scene with the coffins sticking out of the cemetery, it felt a little bit like that, but into an entire house. There's just a lot to like about this one. I didn't like it as much as the IP houses. I thought they could have been a little scarier. I thought it would be more like a few years ago, they did one called La Llorona, not based on the movie, but based off the tale of La Llorona. And that one was way better than this. But still, as far as the non-IP houses, I thought this was the best one, and why it landed here at number 6. Number 5. Stranger Things, which is based off season 2 and 3 of Stranger Things TV show. I really dig the Stranger Things TV show. It's one of the best shows that's come out in the last decade for sure. In fact, I talked about the entirety of season 3 on the podcast that I was just announced that I'm a new host on. It's called The Horror Squad, so check it out where all podcast services are. They have them, iTunes, Stitcher, all that kind of stuff. So check them out. It's a great, great show. I really love being on it, and I'm honored that they picked me as a co-host going forward. So enough of the cheap plugs. The Stranger Things house was really cool. It mimicked some of the big scenes of the 2 seasons. For example, it mimics 11 attacking a Demogorgon, and well, that happens a lot actually. Then you have when she's closing the portal with the Hopper, and you have the Mega Demogorgon, which was really cool. It wasn't to scale, obviously, because it was like really giant in the show, but it was big enough to be like an impressive set piece. So that was awesome. You got to see all the characters, Dustin, Max, all of them. So you know who they are. So there was just a lot. Steve, yeah, I love Steve. He's great on that show. So Stranger Things, it was a really cool house, and there were a lot of great set pieces. What made it fall a little bit for me is it wasn't consistent. So I did all these houses like 3 times at least. Some of them I did 5-6 times, but this one I did 3 times. And the first time I did it, the scare actors were not that great. They were pretty good the second time, and they were pretty good the third time. So on average, they're pretty good. But it's hard to mimic kids with adults because I don't think they can hire kids or something like that. And some of the scenes felt a little like off from the TV show, and I thought they could have picked some better scenes. Like we barely saw Scoops Ahoy, which was such a disappointment because I love that. But anyway, I get it. It's not a scary scene. But overall, still a great house and one that I enjoyed. Number 4. Universal Monsters. Universal Monsters is something that's very, very cool because it represents such a rich history in the horror genre, and the house really hit them all. So it was basically one room for each of the horror of the Universal Monsters. So you have a room dedicated to Dracula, one to Frankenstein's monster, one to the creature of the Black Lagoon, the Wolfman. You had even the Phantom of the Opera in there. You had the Mummy. It's just a really, really cool house, and because it moves from character to character, it never feels boring at all. You're constantly going into something new and new and new. It was just, I think it was the Hunchback and the Phantom of Opera. The 2 rooms were very similar, which was disappointing, but still overall an amazing house, one I really, really enjoyed, and I loved going through it every time because it just moves so fast and the scenes are really cool. And the costumes were really good as well. The creature was fantastic. I love the creature from Black Lagoon. So there you go. Number 3. Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Last year, Killer Klowns from Outer Space had the best scare zone. It was just like fantastic. And this year they decided to put it into a full house. Killer Klowns is really getting some love these days, which is awesome, finally. And the house did not disappoint. A little tangent before I get to the house though. Every year Halloween Horror Nights gets an exclusive figure that they use for like kind of the event, and this year it was Killer Klowns from Outer Space, and it is the best figure I've ever seen. So check out my haul video and you'll see that figure. It's really worth checking out. It's a good scale, it's big, it's detailed, it's awesome. So had to put that out there. What I liked about the Killer Klowns house is I went through this one the most, maybe 6 or 7 times, because A, there was never that big of a line, and B, it was awesome. First, before you even come in, they have the ice cream truck that you can take pictures with some of the Killer Klowns, so that's a fantastic thing right off the bat. One of the things I really liked about this house, and this may sound weird, it smelled really good. So you enter the house and it smells like popcorn. You get a little further and it smells like cake. And you finish off and it smells like cotton candy. So not only did this house look good, but it smelled good. The costumes of the Carol Clowns were fantastic. When you check out my recap video from last year and this year, you'll see them because they're a bit outside. It was the same costumes they had in the Scare Zone last year, and you'll see them in front of the ice cream truck this year. So the costumes were great. The scares were surprisingly really good as well. The Killer Clowns would pop out as places you wouldn't expect, and I really, really loved that. Like, you have the pizza delivery scene, and then the clown pops out of the pizzas, and you have the puppet scene, and clown pops out of the side, and there's just a lot to love. You really felt like you were in this movie. Just a fantastic, fantastic house. Absolutely adore it. You got to see Clownzilla in a really big scale in one of the rooms, and that was fantastic too. So great house, great experience. One of the houses I like the most, and one I consider putting number 2, but you'll see why. Number 2, Us. When I first heard of all the houses going to Halloween Horror Nights this year, Us was probably ranked last as the one I was most excited for. I liked the movie. I didn't love the movie, but I did like the movie. But I didn't think it would translate well into a house. I just didn't understand how they could execute that movie into a good house. I was wrong. They nailed it with this house. This one was moody, it was creepy, the music was good, the scenes were very close to the movie. When you walk into the houses from the movie, you felt like you were there. Like, they really did a great job on atmosphere and recreation of these scenes, and it was a really fantastic house, and it was creepy. Like, it's just people, really. It's just people in orange jumpsuits holding scissors, but they did an amazing job at it. I mean, there's one scare actor in particular. I think he got my wife every single time that we went through that house, and we did that one at least 4 or 5 times. It was a fantastic house, one that I won't forget anytime soon, and surprisingly, one of my favorites. Number 1, Ghostbusters. I mean, Ghostbusters is a top 5 movies of all time for me. So right there's a bias towards the franchise, but also they had to nail it, right? Because I know this movie so well, and I could have easily criticized it for anything that I didn't like, but this house was fantastic. First, you get the library ghost, which you see in 3 different ways. First, you see her like walking back and forth behind some books, and then you see her kind of shushing you, and then there's a scare where she's like in that full like crazy look, and that's one of my favorite ghosts of all time. So definitely awesome for that. And then you get to go into the Ghostbusters headquarters, and there's a real life Janine who actually interacts with you, which is awesome. And the actress that played her was just so good. It was pretty much the same one every night I went except one, but she did a terrific job at interacting with you and making it really funny and stuff like that. And then you get to see all of the major moments from the movie. You get to see, Dana get attacked by the dogs, and you get to see Dana in her full like orange jumpsuit. And the actress they used for her was like really good. Like, she looked a lot like Sigourney Weaver from Ghostbusters. And then you also had Tully, who was there, doing his thing. And you really hit all of the major scenes. You got Slimer in the hotel, and you got even some cameos from, they had the brothers from Ghostbusters 2, I think, made a cameo, and there were some unique ghosts, which apparently are previews for the new Ghostbusters movie next year. That remains to be seen. When I see the movie, I'll recognize them. And it all ends with, you have Gozer, and then finally you have Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And it's like, the scale of it is fantastic. It's huge. Everything about this house was awesome. The sounds were exactly like when they hit the breaker off their machine and it does like that specific it was like perfect. It was exactly the sound that was in the movie, and I just really felt like I was inside the Ghostbusters movie, and I just adored every second of it. I had a huge smile on my face throughout the whole ride, and surprisingly, the biggest scare for most, I don't get scared by houses, but for most, was in this house. They have a Slimer at the end of it that just jumps out of nowhere. And it's not like technically in the house. It's when you're leaving the house. Like you see the security guards and the door. So you think you're safe and then Slimer just pops out, goes right to your face. It's fantastic. I really, really love this house and is one of my favorites of all time. So definitely the Ghostbusters this year. But like I said, all the houses were fantastic this year. I really enjoyed myself, and you need to check out my recap video later this week because you'll see just how cool the event was overall. So that's my list for this week. October's coming up, so all of my lists in October will be horror or Halloween related. There's a lot of fun ones I'm going to do, especially near the end of the month, where I'm going to show my favorite Halloween display pieces, which I have a lot of, and I bought some new ones this year. So it's going to be a great month, so stay tuned for all that. Next week, I'm doing my favorite horror genre, which is ghosts. So I'm going to do my favorite ghost films. Very excited about it. Can't wait to talk about it, so I hope you get to watch that. Of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Goodbye.